people who are watching on Zoom, people who are watching on YouTube, and people who are watching on Facebook. Welcome to Loan Tap's second part of the webinar series, Wading Through Waters. Today, we'll be looking at different questions related to the employment scenario, and we have our experts with us. I would like to introduce our moderator, Mr. Anil. He's a military veteran and has 30 plus years of experience across different industries. I think he has managed large-scale expansions, downsizing everything that comes under the bucket of HR, I suppose. And now I would hand it over to you, Captain. Please take it further.
Thank you, Tanvi, and namaste all. I think this is now the new sign of saying hello, rather than hugging each other or shaking hands. Once again, let me, it gives me an immense pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar brought to you by this terrific Loan Tap team. This team over last 4 years has built a fantastic, one of the finest and fastest growing fintech lending company. So welcome. I'm sure you all are going to have a wonderful time. I have a good news, I would say, and a bad news for all of our viewers and audience. So the good news is we panelists discussed amongst ourselves, and we said we are not going to touch upon any global issue. We are not going to talk about what someone else should do in this particular scenario. There's no global gyan, no how future of work is going to change, how this disruption is going to affect or impact, because that's not going to help. So that's a good news. So we are not going to talk about that and not bore you with that. The bad news is our panelists are experts in their own way, on their own right, and they are going to give us some advices. And let me tell you, those advices are not going to be easy to follow. They will require a lot of hard work from all of us. So I think, I want to start with this, I would say, caveat. Now, I know, this audience which has come in, all participants who are there, there are a variety of people here, and the mix that I see, some of people that I know of. On one hand, we have some of these students, and some of those students, might be still waiting for their dream campus offer. And unfortunately, for some of them, those dream offers have actually become just a dream. There are some other students who might have got offered, but now those offers have been withdrawn. In some cases, their joining dates have been deferred. We also have friends who have joined here who may have, or their loved one may have lost a job, or some of you might have taken salary cuts. So all of us, I think, are staring at a pretty difficult situation in an uncertain future. So if this future is so uncertain, the situation is such dire, what do we do about it? What can we do to change this particular situation? I just remembered and jotted down Kavi Dushyant's 2 lines which said, "Sirf hangama khada karna mera maqsad nahi. Sirf hangama khada karna mera maqsad nahi. सारी कोशिश है कि ये सूरत बदलनी चाहिए." So ये सूरत बदलेगी कैसे? ये सूरत तो बदलनी चाहिए, but how will this? कौन बदलेगा इस हालत को? So to find some answers today, we have an awesome panel with us of experts, a panel who actually needs no introduction. वो कहते हैं ना कि नाम ही काफी है. But just none of the participants comes back to me and says, "Hey, naam kafi क्यों है? नाम चाय क्यों नहीं है?" So I still will introduce them briefly. So we have with us a transformer who is working on a vision to make India a global hub for talent in the emerging technologies. Please welcome Ms. Kirti Seth, lead NASCOM Future Skills. And I want all of you to give a round of applause through using e-media on the chat. I think it'll be wonderful if all of you can say hello and give your e-claps. Next, we have a serial entrepreneur and a crusader who has been championing the cause of employability and employment creation. His companies have trained and placed lakhs of Indians in suitable jobs. He's also an author of first Indian book on job counseling. Please put your hands together and welcome Mr. Muralidharan Thyagarajan, Chairman of TMI Group. Now I have an ever smiling and beloved Chanakya. So yeah, look at the smile which has come on face. People can recognize, without. So he has built an over 16,000 HR professionals community worldwide called MTHR Global. He has helped transform organizations through timeless principles from Indian wisdom. He has taught leadership. His thought leadership is helping hundreds of managers to reinvent themselves, inculcating the eternal Indian and world wisdom. So please welcome Mr. Rajesh Kamath, founder of Chanakya Consulting and founder of MTHR Global. Our penultimate panelist is a HR leader, a speaker, a mentor with varied experience in building leadership culture and talent practices. Please give a big round of applause to Mr. Shubhankar Roy Chaudhary, Executive Director and Head HR, Asia Pacific, Lenovo. Clap. Okay. Last but not the least, I have a behavioral scientist, a trusted and universally respected voice of HR profession in India, who has not 1,000 or 10,000 or 1 lakh, but nearly 2.5 lakh LinkedIn activity followers. It's difficult to digest, that number. He has been acknowledged as one of the top voices on LinkedIn in the year 2020. Once again, please put your hands together and welcome Mr. S.V. Nathan, partner and head HR, India, Deloitte. So with this introduction, I come to the panel, and as I was talking, we have people who are facing a lot of dire situations. And I wonder, all these leaders who are here with me, have they also in their lives faced any such career challenges? So what I'll request is, starting in the reverse alphabetic order, starting with Nathan, can you all share, in 2-3 minutes, 4 minutes, if you yourself have, come across face to face with such a career disruption, and what did you do at that point of time? How did you overcome it? Over to you, Nathan.
Thank you, Anil. Pleasure to be with all the co-panelists, not to forget a lot of people who have joined us today as participants. It's my pleasure to be with all of you. It's a lazy Saturday afternoon, and for you to take this time out to be with us is your commitment to knowing a little bit about what we are going to be sharing this afternoon. This was, every 8 years, there is a certain cycle that happens of an economic downturn. And the one that happened around 2000 was the one that was really, really bad. I was leading an organization at that time, and I had to do that very, very difficult and delicate task of asking people to leave. And so we shed almost like 20% of our people. Conversations were difficult. And how much can you really look people in the eye and tell them that they are not needed anymore? It hurt me deeply. And it was in one of those early mornings of a sleepless night when I looked at myself in the mirror I looked at myself as a cost. And I told myself, if I removed myself from the firm, then there's every possibility that it would feed a few more people. I took that decision, went up to my CEO. I mentioned all of this. And at that point in time, he thought I was crazy, but I was very determined. And I just simply put in my papers. I came home. It was not very easy because that was a disruptor, because it was a time when it was almost difficult. It was this Y2K, the big changes that were happening, and people are getting slammed all over. It's easy for you to come home. It's very easy to have taken that decision. But 1 week into making that decision or taking that decision, my children started to look at me. Before they went to school, they used to say, Papa, what are you doing at home? Just imagine what response will you give to your children, who they've always seen you button up your shirts, polish your shoes, shine them, and wear your jacket, and you're off to work. It was one of the most difficult moments of my life because jobs were not available. And it's not easy to go back to the same organization. Of course, they were quite willing, but I really felt that that would not have helped matters. It was easily one of the most difficult 69 days in my life. I remember every day of those 69 days. I have a diary with me. And I remember what I did. I think, for people who have either been displaced or people who have lost a job or people who say, okay, now I'm going to do something different, it rattles you when you have an EMI to pay. In those days, we didn't have anything called loan tap that we could approach, and not easy. Where will you go? And then it's very difficult to stomach. So I decided that I will focus on three things, and just those three things. I decided that I will connect, I will develop, and I will understand. And when I say connect, I wanted to really connect with all those people that I know in the industry. Several friends, and quite shamelessly at that, shamelessly, going across and reaching people that you have not connected in a very long time. It sounded a little funny in the beginning, but I needed something. So I realized that the only thing that you got to do is go out, ask, पूछने में क्या है? So I went in and asked a lot of my friends, and some of them in high places. And so connecting was very, very important. We didn't have WhatsApp in those days. There were no connectors. There was no medium. So the only thing was a good old telephone, which I used to good effect. Second one was develop. I started to look at what are those skills that I really needed to develop, because I would have to get into something very different, very new. And it's something where I'll have to almost rediscover myself. And if it is about how you really start to develop yourself, you have to get to that deep understanding of yourself. You won't believe it. I still have those pages with me. I would write down every day, what are the 5 things that I can do really well? And what am I not good at? The ones that I'm not good at, I'm not going to try and believe that I can really cross the chasm. It's not easy. I decided that I will be good in a few things. I will continue to do that. So it gets me back. So understanding myself also means that I have to take feedback. Shamelessly, going back to a lot of my friends, people who are working with me, I used to ask them, hey, listen, what do you think? What do you think I'm good at? What do you think that I'm not good at? What do you think I can never be good at? Jotting those things. And then when you talk about development, we didn't have all these certification courses or really trying to evaluate. But then when you talk about development, you really have to dialogue. So I started to seek a mentor. somebody out there in the industry. And I used to talk to this person almost every day. It helped me hugely. At a psychological level, I felt a lot more at peace. I leveled with myself. The only thing which was difficult was my children on and off would ask me, Dad, when are you going, when are you going to get a job? When are you out of this house? And we didn't have COVID in those days. So they still expected that on a Saturday or Sunday, you would take them around. And so it's important to look at the three things. One is, how do you connect? How do you understand? And how do you develop? And when you looked at what are the things that you have to develop, I know for a fact what are the ones that I said I'm going to develop. It helped me hugely because I then decided I'll move into a completely new industry. And moving industries was nothing new to me. But I decided that before I move into an industry, I will do some real soul searching. So which is what I did. I felt very happy. That disruption of 2000, I will never forget because till date, it remains for me something very personal. And time and again, in my highs and in my lows, I will remember what happened in all of the 69 days. So back to you, Anil. I don't know whether all of this makes sense, but that's the one that moved my life.
No, thank you, Nathan. It certainly makes a lot of sense. In fact, I went back. I remember, after I did my MBA, after leaving Forge, I did a 2-year MBA, and I didn't get a job for 5-6 months. And during that time, one of our neighbor's kid, 5-year-old, walked in and said, "Uncle, aap kaam nahi karte kya?" And that, hurt it here that I remember it till maybe many times people would have said, aap office nahi gaye kya? Office nahi jate kya? So till date, so sometimes at that period of time, I think emotionally, so, and what advice that you have given from a connecting, understanding and developing, I think is wonderful, takeaway. Thank you, Nathan, and we go to Shubhankar.
Yeah, hi, Anil. So firstly, thank you for the opportunity. It's great to be in this panel and talk to all of you. So I have been, in many ways, been working with organizations that has either got disrupted or actually have been bought and sold. And in what happened in the process is that multiple roles have got impacted. There was an organization I worked with which acquired my company, and overnight things changed. Or there was a situation where in one particular massive reorganization, the entire region got separated from the global headquarters and the disruption happened. But what I'm going to share with you is one particular incident, which was way back in 2007. It was a time when I was working in this company. I was a year old in the organization. The organization had invited me to join them. And as a part of my role expansion, the organization decided to give me a wider and a bigger responsibility and have a relocation from Mumbai to Singapore. Very excited. It was a great new opportunity. I was looking forward for a role expansion. I was looking forward to a new country. I was looking forward to meet new people. And I took on the opportunity and relocated to the new city. After 3 months, I must also share a bit about my personal background. My wife was having a very steady career. My daughter was born. She was less than a year old. And we didn't want to put all eggs in one basket. So what we decided was I will go first, and then my family will join me. 6 months after I settled myself in Singapore, took up a house, got the infrastructure ready, and then told my wife that it's time that you can now join me. It was a very, very tough decision, but we were very optimistic as a family that it would work out. So we called the movers and packers because it was a company initiated transfer. The movers and packers started packing our goods in Mumbai. And in the middle of the process, I hear a very, very unpleasant news that my organization was going through a massive reorganization. And my role, which was a regional role, had become redundant. And at the same time, what I forgot to share with you that the job my wife had, she had also resigned. The house we lived in Mumbai, we had given the tenant the notice, and the new tenant had actually signed off for the lease. So here I was in a situation where I did not have a job. I was given a couple of months to look at what could be the next chapter for me. My wife did not have a job. We had a small daughter and no accommodation or shelter in top of her head. So this was the challenge that was at that point in time. It seemed that the world had actually fallen all around us and we did not know what to do. But as I look back those years, one of the greatest strengths or experiences I've learned is about being change resilient, because over a period of time, industries are getting disrupted, business models are changing, global policies of the government are changing, and something like a pandemic really makes things so uncertain for everyone. So being able to manage change and being change resilient is very important. So that was one of the biggest learning. The second thing that I actually have really learned is that in many of these situations, you can control a few variables and there are few variables you can't control. So what I could control is the fact that what are the options in front of me? What I could control, as Nathan said, what kind of networks do I have? What I could control is the fact that what skill sets am I good at? These are some of the things that you can control, but you cannot control the fact what has already happened. So why don't I look forward and focus on things that I control? The third thing that is very important, having big nature and handle multiple, resource actions in the past, is that everybody goes through a very painful change process when there is a job loss. So we go from anger and a denial phase to an acceptance phase, and finally we try to make best use of the situation. And in such moments, it's very important that we think rationally and not emotionally. The more we think emotionally, the more chances are that we further decrease our opportunities for those who are around us and also maybe in the companies that we have worked with. So it is a big learning that how can you come out of the change curve? Very easy to sit here and say that, but very, very difficult to implement in real life. And the last thing that I would share is that every challenge also opens up opportunities. In many of the downturns in the past, those were economic challenges. But this current situation of a pandemic is a very, very unique situation where I personally see that while many of the industries like the aviation, hospitality, and many others have been very, very badly hit, but at the same time, we are seeing frugal innovation coming up in many different ways. There are sunrise industries popping up, whether it is digital medical services, whether it is collaboration tools, whether it is distant learning through technology. Technology has been a great leveler. So when anything that is getting disrupted, there are also new opportunities of the horizon that's come up. Why don't we be proactive and try to understand what the future offers us and be able to write those opportunities and they make best use of the situation? So this was a little bit of a personal story where I was in a very, very challenging situation, but I must share that this was not the only story. In my career, I have actually, my career has been disrupted maybe a few times because of the industry I belong to. So change is the only permanent thing and it will continue even more as we look into the future. Thank you, Anil, back to you.
Thank you, Shubhankar, for sharing. And, talking about, I think you very rightly said, resilience is so important. And also, I think looking forward that what is coming up, because everything is not negative and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you very much for showing that light. I would go now to Rajesh.
Sure. So lovely to hear from our earlier panelists. So my career disruption was as recent as 2013. And I used to work in a consulting firm. I was doing very well. Just 6 months before this happened, I got promoted to what would be the second level in a consulting firm. And I used to be responsible for a region. And suddenly I was told that I would now have to move into Mumbai for a completely new role. Okay, now the problem was not about moving into a new role, but I felt very let down that I didn't know this was being done without my knowledge, right? And I'd taken all my time and effort to cultivate a new region which was completely foreign to me when I began. And after it was totally developed, and it was just going to move to someone else. So it just got me thinking what I should do at this point in time. I thought I had let enough of, I would say, organizations to decide what my career should be. So I changed my strategy completely, and I decided that I will make this disruption the best possible disruption. Of course, I can say this in retrospect. I thought what I should do next. I decided to turn entrepreneur. And this wasn't easy because I had no intent in the last 20 plus years before that of ever turning entrepreneur. So I was that kind of a person who always enjoyed my stable life, getting a salary every month. So it was difficult, number one. Number two, it was difficult to come up with what should I do next, because being in HR the large part of my career and in training, there are so many consultants and consulting firms. I definitely didn't want to do more of the same, and there's no distinction. So that's when I decided I will do something which is difficult, but will be absolutely unique. At least at that point in time, I think it still continues to be unique. And I combined my passion, which was for a long time Indian wisdom and Indian way of management. And I started studying this very, very deeply. I've never worked as hard as in that year 2013 to 2014, and then continued with that. That formed a good habit. I spent a lot of time, almost 4 hours per day, learning all about what many people would know today about Arthashastra, and a lot more connected things. Now, more important was, how does this go back to organizations? Because all my life, I have dabbled in modern management. And so I also had to rework everything that I learned to adapt it to modern organizations. And I didn't even know if there would be any takers. So that was going to be the biggest challenge. And I tell you, this was the time when I shared with some of my friends, well-wishers. Of course, everyone wanted me to do well, but I could see the look on everyone's face was, please don't do it, Rajesh. It won't work. And still inside of me, I knew this is what I wanted to do. Long story short, the start was very difficult. My first 6 months was extremely challenging. And I treat that as actually the best education of my life, because I really got down to what today I think we are experiencing, right? Living on frugal resources. And then I kind of started working with one friend to begin with. Yes, old contacts do help. And I was very hesitant about speaking about all that I do before it has gained some traction, before I have some success story. So 1 or 2 organizations later, I became more confident. And that is what I do now, 5.5 years, almost 6 years now. And I can say for myself, that was the best move. So I would say 3 words, and this applies at all times, especially during disruptions. First is rethink. I think being in a comfort zone is a great disadvantage. So we must welcome disruptions, reskill, and reskill to the level of, I would say, proficiency. Claim mastery, but I worked extremely hard to the level of proficiency to make sure that I would be the one who in this field people can look up to rely on. And finally, research, which I think is the most difficult part, because our lack of confidence, I've seen this with numerous entrepreneurs, our lack of confidence actually doesn't let us move ahead many a times. So I built, brick by brick, but I kept pushing myself, back myself up. And I think the learning therefore is, friends, if there is a disruption, including the present times, this is the greatest opportunity you have. Please grab it. Yes, Anil, back to you.
Thank you, Rajesh. I think really that was a road that you took, which was less traveled, or at that point of time, I think not at all traveled. And what you talked about, rethink, reskill, and research is very. Thank you very much. Now, may I request Murali sir. When I look at your profile, looks like you won't have had any disruptions. Successful serial entrepreneurship journey. So right from academics to going till now. But I'm very intrigued to hear if you have had any such disruptions in your life.
Exactly the opposite happened. Whatever you said is not true. I've been bankrupt 3 times, and I'm going to be telling you a story of how I almost became bankrupt in 2000. Entrepreneurs have a very tough time. I think all of us, I think Rajesh will also support it. 1999, December, I go to ICICI Ventures. I make a presentation for a new idea. I get valued at 24 crores at that time. I get a check for 6 crores without any due diligence, because they've done some kind of research and they liked me, and then they gave me the money. The whole cycle time for presentation to commitment was 48 hours. So on December 31st, 1999, it was a high. We were partying like mad because I was also young at the time. But really, somebody saw value in what you did. And we were supposed to launch a new company, which is called a learning science company in 2000. And that was August 15th, Chandrababu Naidu, Chief Minister, launches a new company. We invited 25 CEOs. A super night, Krishna Oberoi. 18th, I go to Delhi. We are supposed to get a second round of funding from HSBC Private Equity. Presentation goes well, they commit. Unfortunately, the person who's supposed to negotiate is not there. 21st, I come back and we were told the deal is off and we are bankrupt because we had invested a lot of money in the first round of funding. Second round of funding is not there. We were losing about 50 lakh rupees or 60 lakh rupees per month. And our group company, another group company, was too small to fund it. So from August 21st, I think it took almost 5 years for us to revive that company. Today, that CNK Management is one of the best companies in our group. It does a lot of international global work on e-learning and learning science, and especially digital learning. That's one of our specialty. So when I look back at that time, I think 3 things I learned from that experience. One, and it's always been with me, but first and foremost, never take failures personally. So in that period of 6 years, when I sold off a lot of my properties, I didn't take salaries for 2 to 3 years from the company. And I must give a lot of credit to my wife, because both of us lived a very frugal life. And we cut down all the costs to such a rock bottom level. And I was literally living off my wife's salary at the time. Cut your cost is the first rule when crisis comes, because sometimes your lifestyle is the biggest liability which we carry. The second thing I learned was when you say not to take it personally, especially as an entrepreneur, as like Anil said, a lot of you have a qualification, a lot of expectations from people, and suddenly you go and start selling your property. My family was devastated. My parents, my in-laws, everybody thought something was wrong with me, because right now with all the factors in your favor, you're losing so badly. So it is very tempting to fall into depression, fall into saying something wrong with me. But the first thing, as I said, I dusted it off and said, no, it happens to everybody. And this was a dot-com bust. And I will not take it personally, whatever be the scenario. And there are times when we already committed money. The vendors used to come to my office to collect money. We didn't have money to pay. The rule we followed was to be in front of the vendor and talk to them, not to run away. So it's been a excruciatingly difficult time, but that concept of sticking to the third, that is the third point I'm going to talk about, living one day at a time. So when you're in deep crisis, you cannot talk about projections of a long duration. What will I do now? I think today, what I'm going to do today morning, when I get up in the morning, make your plan for the day, put your head into the problem, don't run away from it, and see whatever you can do. At the end of the day, you go back and start again tomorrow. So one day at a time was also a very, very critical concept, which I picked up and I stay with it. It's something similar to what they call an Alcoholic Anonymous, but I think one day at a time is very critical in crisis time, because anxiety levels are so high, and the more we think into the future, more the uncertainty, more the anxiety. So never in that. So that's the brief summary. First one is cut the cost one day at a time, and don't take anything personally. These are the three things I carry with me. Thank you.
I think, thank you very much. Again, when I'm listening to these stories, these are so fascinating. I was just looking at, I kept a stopwatch there to, keep track of time. So before I go to Kirti, can I go to Tanvi? Maybe, if our participants and if panel is okay, maybe I would request if we can extend some time, because these stories, actually what we all have gone through and how we have handled. And when I, the sutras, you can say, from a Rajesh's point of view, which are coming, and each one is so unique, I think you talk so beautifully, don't take a failure personally. And many times we take it to the heart, I think, and that's where a lot of other problems of not being able to bounce back starts. So thank you very much for sharing. Kirti, when I look at, again, your profile, we know each other for nearly now 2 decades, and to me looks like a hunky-dory, journey. So again, very curious after, because again, Murali I met in 2001, almost 20 years. And many times you don't even come to know, even after being, close and knowing what's going on the other side, because we think our problems are problems but others don't have. So looking forward to, what you have to share and open the pitara.
Thanks, Anil. I guess my perspective is a little different from the rest of you, because being a woman, I'm just listening to all your stories and I'm saying, when I wanted to think back to say, what's a disruption? You realize, at least given from what I've heard on this panel, everything that happened to me was a disruption. But in the life of a woman, I guess that's, you either take it in your stride and say, well, that's life. And when life, sometimes you can say it gives you lemons and you make lemonade. But sometimes, most of the time actually, you don't even think that it's lemons, because you just think that that's, for life to go on, it has to be that way. You take it on the chin and move on and make the best of it. So it starts with, when you graduate from a wonderful college, you have a fantastic job, then you get married, then suddenly you realize that there are two careers in this equation. What happens? Whose career takes precedence? So do you start having a competition out there and saying, no, it's me, not you? Or is it, well, this is the way it's going to be, and you just decide somewhere unconsciously that this is who's going to take the lead and who's going to follow? But in your life, you've never followed. But now suddenly you automatically start to follow. So the first thing happens when your husband's career takes precedence. What happens to yours? And your career then gets disrupted. So when he moved out of the country and I had to quit my job, and I had to follow and get whatever job I could get in whichever country I was in, by which time babies had come along. So now are babies a disruption, or are babies a fact of life? I think babies are a fact of life. I want babies. So whatever compromise, in inverted terms, inverted commas, or whatever disruption that they cause, it's okay, because it's the baby that's important at that point in time. So now your entire career has gone a little topsy-turvy, because now you're in a different country. One baby has come along. Now you changed your country, and then another baby has come along. So again, job has changed, baby has come, dynamics have changed. So your career's all gone for a toss. Then husband decides, I want to come back and I want to now quit my career and start a business. So I really resonated with what Rajesh and what Murli said. And I really liked his comment of live one day at a time, because it's really like that. When you're in a job, you are somebody. When you become an entrepreneur, you're nobody. Your visiting card carries weight. When you're in a job, it carries the weight of the organization. And when you become on your own, you're no one. Suddenly you have to go and beg for that business, and you people who you thought were your friends are not your friends. But what the hell, you set up a business, you have faith in yourself. So we did, my husband and I set up a business. It was very tough. First was, of course, the ego bashing of being someone to being no one, from being buyer to being supplier, from being, the whole vendor tag. Even today, I use the word vendor very carefully because I know what it feels like to be a vendor. It still hurts. And I don't know which one of you, I think Murli said that we talked to our vendors straight in the eye and we told them the problem. And we did that too. And it stands me in good stead even till today. So I think respect for the other side of the table is perhaps the thing I learned the most after being an entrepreneur. And frankly, what I set up at that time was a call center business. It was the first domestic call center business. ACDs, automatic call distributors, call centers, lease lines, all these things were very new at that time. This I'm talking late 90s. But I learned, I read up stuff. So talking about reskilling that Rajesh talked about, I knew nothing about technology. I knew nothing about telecom. I knew nothing about CRM. I knew nothing about software. I knew nothing about databases. But we set up a business. I learned all that. I learned sales. I mean, I had done finance in IIM because I didn't want to do sales. As, oh, who wants to go and sell? But we were running a telemarketing operation. That's the most difficult type of sales. So I not only learned to do sales, I learned to train on sales. I learned to deal with the fact that your employees will come and go. Every 6-8 months, you will have a churn. How do you deal with that? So all these things I learned. Books, my best friend. Vendors, my second best friend. Because what vendors can teach you about what services they supply to you, they know it from the competition side, they know it from what they do. And in order to try and sell what they have, they educate you. They give you some magic words. Then you go back and you read up, what do those magic words mean? And then you go behind them and you learn about it. And I'm very proud to say that not only did I learn it for my own business at that time on how this whole telephony system works and how call centers work, I actually consulted with organizations later on how to set up distributed networks. I'm not even a technology person, but I was able to do that because I listened. I had an open mind, and I think most importantly, I had respect. I had real respect for the people I was working with. So if I talk about disruptions, I think it came at multiple times. It came when our business was going low down and one of us had to go and get a job. So I had to leave that business and go and get a job again. Joined a company which I didn't know anything about. It was a training company. I knew nothing about training, but I knew about learning. And I knew about operations, which I learned in my own business. I learned about process. I learned about frugality. Murli, again, something that I completely agree with what you said about being frugal. Don't waste your money, save cost. And that helped me in this organization. Again, went back to the books, read up about training. Because it's not about doing the training, it's about how do you design training? How do you make training effective? It's the whole theory of training. I mean, you're teaching, you're selling something, you better know what it is. And as time went on, I mean, the story is long and the disruptions continue from divorces to cancer to relocations to, to reorganizations to almost not losing jobs, but retrenching people. So all those have happened. But I come back to the first point, actually never considered them disruptions. I just considered them as life moments which you manage to the best what you can. I think family and friends really help you in those times. That's what gives you courage. So relationships, I think, are most important. And at times like this, where this is so widespread around us, people are losing jobs, I think salary reductions now, nobody even bothers about this, saying salary reduction, okay, at least I have a job. But today it's a very tough situation. And then there is a fear of health. There is a fear of safety. There is a fear of loved ones. How are they? Are they okay? My son is in the US. I don't know when I'll see him again because I don't know when the planes will start. I don't know. So, but he's fine. I'm fine. He's making the best of it. I'm making the best of it. So a day at a time, I come back to that. Look for the silver lining. And then it doesn't seem like a disruption. It seems like another change which you've got to deal with. So you deal with it and you move on.
No, I think how beautiful you put it, these are not disruptions. And many times it's difficult for, us to accept that itself, that this is part of life, this is way of life sometimes. And if we take it in our strides. And also I fully agree what you talked about, women, especially in, on the career side, from a profession perspective, we have seen, I think, so many of them facing so many additional challenges as compared to, I think, what we as men face. They are doctors, they are engineers, they're chartered accountants, and who, because of, who goes first and where we, draw that line and take that responsibility, and that responsibility when they take. So maybe, I'll request Lone Tap team to have another session only around this. I think is a very, very important. Okay, thank you all for sharing, and we have around 48 minutes. So I requested Tanvi, and she has agreed, and we have extended the session by 15 minutes. And certainly, I want to let it go on. When I'm listening to all of you, I think there is so much more to listen to and understand. So another piece of info I wanted to share is we have more than 300 people who have logged in on Facebook, and here on Zoom we have 180 plus, and so there's a large number of people who are with us today. And
yes, sir.
I'm sure
And I think we've been getting so many questions that we want to take up a bonus session of 15 minutes from all of you, so that we can answer all of them. So
You can take a little more time also. I from my side, at least another half an hour is fine. No problem.
thank you,
Okay,
sir. That's
thank
really
you.
kind of you.
What about other panel members? How are we placed?
I'm fine too.
So I'll go with other panelists as well. Anil, let's do it.
Okay,
Great.
great. So
We can
Kirti,
go until
Nathan.
5 o'clock. No problems.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this, I think, gives us. So what I'll do is just to bring in people. There are a couple of first questions that came in. I think quickly we can answer those, and then we go to the next. So one question was, what is more important, experience or education? Anyone of you can take and quickly answer. This is the Shravan Korde who has asked, experience or education, which is more important?
Unequivocally both.
Both. Okay. So we get that answer.
Anil, I'll just
Mayur.
add one thing over there. I
Yeah.
think it is the quality of experience that counts. That's the most important thing, right? Because you can get decades of experience and it could still matter much lesser if you haven't had too much of content within that. So I would say even within your career, look for, within the same job, look for multiple roles.
I would say that both are two sides of the same coin. More the experience you get, more educated you become. Right? What you carry in campuses is nothing. The real life teaches you more. So if you're a continuous learner, you're learning and experiencing. Both are two sides of the same coin.
I just want to add, I just want to add a little bit of, sorry. So I agree with what we are discussing. There's only a small twist is as we look at the future, and this is also about employability. So formal degree as an importance, probably as we look into the future, would have lesser importance, and we are more moving towards what kind of skill and how employable those skills are. Also, when we look at the gig economy coming in, I probably would see that over a period of time, a formal education may not hold as much of an importance as we look into the future. But it would take some time for this change to happen.
So I'm going to put Shubhankar on the spot on this one, because sitting where I sit on future skills, this is what we hear a lot. But when we actually talk about recruitment with all you large companies, when we try from the skills perspective, we say, please look at the skills of this person.
I agree. I totally agree.
You all have which college, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, what is the cutoff, what is the stream. So you got to put your money where your mouth is on that statement.
So I will intervene. I will intervene here. Shubhankar, just for a minute, I'll intervene for a reason, because in the next section we are going to discuss about it. So if you hold your thoughts till then, I have another interesting question from Mayur Sodra, who says, before Corona, we thought we will get increment and we have worked hard full year, but now due to Corona situation, is reduction in salary started. So in this situation, should we ask our managers for an increment?
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, I think Nathan, sure, please.
This is not the time for you to ask for an increment. This is the time when you should ask your manager what you can do for the firm. This is the time what you can do for what your organization that counts. Because you should be putting your shoulder to that wheel. All ships will rise with the tide. And this is the time when we are moving through uncharted waters. We want all hands on deck. This is not about personal aggregation. Oh, what's going to happen to my increment? I mean, there are people who would hardly get salaries. There are lives on the line. This is the time for you to own it up and say, what can I do for the firm? I think that, even if there's a small expression of that, not just in ones and twos to start with, it just goes a very long way. And remember, people have long memories. They will always come back and say, hey, this was a person who came and helped us at the right time. I think that is what is required by organizations. By the way, many organizations feel it because there are many people like that who have come out. There's always this fear about not the increment, but about my job. That's a different question.
No, thank you, Nathan. I think you have very well put it and very well answered. Now, after listening to you all and your stories and, the questions which are coming from a jobs point of view, from what happens, salary, increments, etc. There are a lot of thoughts which are going in your mind. And one of the article, a story that I read, which Murali sir had written in one of his articles, where he talked about, he went to a village in Rajasthan, in Dasra, I think is what name, and met a Sarpanch and his brother. So they both were postgraduate and graduate, and he was talking to, and he was saying, hey, why villagers don't, are not interested in educating their children? And he said, the guy answered, is that unko job kaun dega, aap dilayenge kya? And then he realized that day, the Sarpanch and his brother's whole family was working in the field. But these two guys didn't go there because one is a MA, one is, Bachelor of Arts. So because of degree somewhere holding, how can I, do this menial work? So this story, brings, and Murali, I'll, start with you here. How do I think people, should we put our, mind and body first, or first try and address in this stage this heart-related issues, the emotional side of it, the attitudinal aspects. What are your thoughts on it, sir?
It's in the context of education system. Is that the question?
Yeah, education system as well as from a job, even from a job and career point of view, because I'm in a particular job. If I am out of this job, how can I take that other role within the organization? If organization says, hey, Anil, I move you, you are doing X job. What to do? I think, no, that's not a department I want to go to, or that's a job which is of a lower level. There are many, such things which keep holding us from doing what we are pretty much capable of doing. So just to add to that.
Okay, I think I'll reframe it like this. How do you make decisions when there are emotional as well as logical answers to the same question? And I think my experience has been, and I've met large number of 100,000 people I've interviewed for jobs, senior level, and specifically Indians, we are highly emotional. And more qualification you get very good in justifying what you have decided emotionally. So first, I believe all of us make emotional choices, and more educated you are, more qualified you are, use logic to justify what you already decided. So the biggest challenge in my life has been always how to suspend judgment. You are in real time making judgments every second, every moment, and that's what we've been taught. You go to IIT and IIM, everybody tells you how fast you are in responding, how quickly you're able to come to decisions is a sign of success or achievement. But in reality, in personal choices when you make in life, for example, you talked about what kind of a job, I lose my job, what do you do? These are all emotional situation. So you need to find emotional answers. Any kind of logical answers in an emotional scenario is a waste of time. I can tell you, but it will not go into your head because you need to understand it emotionally. And that's why I always felt that when people go through an emotional experience, they need an emotional catharsis. They need to have an experience of talking to somebody, going through that reflection. All this must happen. And logical answers don't work. So I would always pitch for accepting the emotional side of me, and whatever it says, listen to it carefully, and then try and resolve it inside myself about those questions and choices that I make, and then not to allow my logic to justify whatever emotionally I do, because then you're only making emotional choice. You're not making logical choice. So suspending judgment, reflection, going through the emotional pain is all part of choice making.
Hey, Murali, thank you for saying that. It almost goes back to the understanding of self that I shared some time ago. Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Yeah, thank you.
Anil, you need to unmute.
Sir, you'll have to unmute.
Sorry. No, I have a slightly bad throat and I've been, coughing in intermittently. So I keep putting it on mute. Sorry for, yeah. So, firstly I said, sir, I think very rightly put, coming to Rajesh, from the ancient or a Indian wisdom perspective, looking at the same question, which I asked, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I echo what Murali said. And I will combine this with what Nathan said. I think we need a mentor or someone to act as catalyst for us. I feel that's very important. Okay, and since you spoke about Indian wisdom, I'm going to give our participants an interesting story. So I'm basically a storyteller in my profession and otherwise. Okay, so here is a story, and I'm going to tell you in a short way, 2.5 minutes. So Narad Muni goes to Vishnu, and I'm presuming our audience know who Narad Muni is. He's the guy who keeps saying Narayan, Narayan. And he is one of the Lord's deputies. So he goes to Narad Muni and asks him one day that who is your favorite deputy? And obviously expects his name because he has been so close to the Lord. And very matter-of-factly, Vishnu says, why, it is Garud. Garud is the Vahan of Vishnu, and he's also the king of birds. So Narad Muni is shocked. He can't believe that the Lord can say that Garud is a favorite. So he asks him, how can that be? I'm the one who keeps saying Narayan, Narayan every couple of minutes. I'm your messenger in the three lok. I'm the guy who has written Bhakti Sutras for your devotion. How can that guy be your favorite? So Vishnu decides that, this guy is getting emotional. The only way to answer him is emotionally, like Murli sir said, right? So he decides to give him a demonstration. At that very moment, there is a crash outside Vishnu's residence, Vaikunt, obviously created by the Lord, but not known to Narad Muni. So he sends Narad outside saying that, can you please check what that noise was? So Narad Muni goes and comes back to report saying that it was a milkmaid who was walking with pots on her head and, she fell, and that's the sound of the pots. So Vishnu says, but why did she fall? So Narad Muni, slightly irritated with the second question, goes out, comes back and reports that she was walking on the road and a serpent passed in her path. She was startled and she dropped her pots. And then Vishnu asks, but does she have anything remaining, or has she lost all her pots in the process? Now Narad Muni, is even more irritated, says, Lord, can you ask me all your questions all at once? Please don't ask me one by one. So Narad Muni goes and he comes back and he's about to report when Garud comes swooping in. Okay, Garud was on some trip and he comes swooping in. And Vishnu tells him, you know what, Garud, when you were out, there was this crash outside Vaikunt. And I was wondering if, and before he can complete, Vishnu can complete his sentence, Garud goes to investigate. And he takes almost 5-6 minutes, and Narad is thinking, what a useless guy this guy is, and how can he be Lord's favorite? Garud comes back and reports. He said the noise was because a milkmaid fell with all her pots except one. She passes from here every day at 3 p.m. She's going to the marketplace. And as she was going to the marketplace today, a serpent appeared from nowhere. She got startled and dropped the pots. Looking at her condition and that she has only one pot left, I already struck a deal with her and told her, my Lord, my master is a very kind man and he can give you a good price for this. If you tell me what your price is, I will make sure you get more than that. So Lord, if you agree, I can go and buy the remaining milk that she has. Narad Muni, just listening to what Garud said, he no longer needed an explanation. Okay, so the answer is, it always has to be emotional, but if you can get a catalyst, a mentor, someone who can shake you up, because if so, I mean, again, going back to what Murli said, logic doesn't work here. So you need someone to shake you up. And if that happens, then whether you are Narad or Garud or a human, it will work for you.
I think very well put, Rajesh. And I think this Garuda attitude, I will call it, or a Garuda approach, I think is so essential. And many times we are on that Narad, way of doing things, and then we expect the results which Garuda is getting and which doesn't happen. If any of other panelists want to add anything, or I'll move on to the next question.
I'd like to add something on this concept, what he talked about. In Shell, I used to work for Shell, and we used to have a concept of completed staff work. The completed staff work, my boss explained to me, when I give you a job, I want the report on Monday. When I say that, what I mean is, you're supposed to complete the report, put the cover, complete it without a single spelling mistake, write my covering letter, and write the envelope, find out what the courier is coming, what time, bring it to my office 10 minutes before the courier, take my signature and deliver to the courier. That's he called completed staff. Most of us understand, I give a report means I'll give some report to you on Monday morning, right?
What is
Not a concept. So which is Garuda's concept of completed staff work.
Murli, it takes me back to my my MNC days at ICI.
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing. Completed staff work is so much part of our lives, and maybe part of our upbringing as well, early days.
But it's come back now in the form of Scrum, hasn't it? When you have the concept of done.
Yeah.
It's so simple. Done means done. Not that it is done, but it's completed, but this is still, no, done means done.
Done. Yes.
Like
Yeah, so
Garud.
this is another, I think, is reading Kirti's profile and Scrum Master and Agile, is what I think constant, learner, I would say. Coming, to another aspect of our discussion, and, Shubhankar, in one of your posts, I was reading where you talked about a story in a restaurant in Hong Kong. So where Shubhankar, talked about saying he walked across to a restaurant, was sitting, and there was a guy who came with a dog in his hand, and in the other hand he had a muffin, and he kept that muffin on the table, and this dog was sitting just, the nose as close to that plate, and then he went to get a cup of coffee, and he said, I was looking at this, puppy, saying, this dog is going to any moment jump, wag tail, do something, and then going to, either eat it or at least do some act, but he didn't move. He just kept sitting, watching till the time the person came, and then Shubhankar asked that question, what training can do, and I think, am I right, Shubhankar?
Yeah, that's right. It's one of the most fascinating. Firstly, I love dogs, and it's such a wonderful moment to see what you just described.
Yeah. So that took me to a question, and that's what I think discussion was starting between Kirti and even Shubhankar. What is more important? Is it a certification part of it? So my first question is really both from a soft skills perspective as well as the hard skills and knowledge perspective. How much are we trainable or changeable as human beings? Are we at all or not? And if yes, how much? And if we are not, then what is it that becomes a barrier in our mind? So this is one question that I have.
Before we start that story, I want to just talk a little bit about the dog story. There's a Filipino who comes and runs a program, I think, in one of the channels, and he trains dogs. And I think it's a fabulous story where he goes to the house, the dog is very upset, emotional. And then she asks him, how are you going to train the dog? He said, no, I'm going to train you. So many times the owners are the problem, not the dog.
So true, so true.
Where the problem is.
So true, so true.
So shall I respond to your question, Anil, or shall I start with what Kirti had asked me, as a part of the conversation? So it goes back to the discussion of knowledge versus degrees versus skill set. So Kirti, at the other side of the table in the corporate, things are changing. So my current remit is Asia Pacific. I have also worked in Middle East and Africa. And I see that in different markets, there are different ways people shape up their career and also are employable. As an example, many of the CVs in some of the countries do not have an education degree. And it baffled me in the initial days that we have always had a very structured way of looking at a CV, that it would be this education, this graduation, this master's. Sometimes we look at marks and certificates. But there are CVs that used to land up in my table, not now, but earlier, where you just don't see an education qualification at all. And when you look at some of the careers even at the leadership level, my boss who was in Middle East, when I used to work with Nokia, I used to work the sales VP of the region. He had a fabulous career where he did many things, traveled the world, had a diploma from Netherlands, trained with a lot of other companies, and then grew up in his ranks. If I look at the sales and marketing roles in many of the countries, they do not have what we would consider in India a pedigree from the IIMs, as an example. There are people who have built restaurant business. One of our leaders has built a restaurant business, sold it off, got into technology at a very later part of the life, and then just grew into the technology industry. So it is a lot depends on which country you are in, how you look at employability versus with a frame of reference of education versus skill. That's number one. I think the second response that I would have is it also depends on the nature of the job. If I look at some of the technology job, and I do not deal a lot with technology research and development and software engineers because my focus is large in the commercial side. But those who are into hackathons and who have skill certifications, which are more contemporary in nature, are much more employable than the skills that somebody would have accredited many, many years back. The biggest challenge that I see in some of the software companies, of course, we are more close to it, is that how do you transition and make people employable to the new skill set than that what they have been always used to. So the third point is about using artificial intelligence and data science. There are nowadays ways where one would able to have a much sharper assessment process, moving and using data science along with the interview to identify the employability. And finally, though not us, but there are companies who have started in a very limited way, not to look at the minimum certification of a graduate for being employment for a graduate role in a company at the starting role. So these are changes that are happening. We see a disruption in the education sector because education has been one of the least disrupted industry till now. But with COVID, I think there is also a big onslaught of disruption I'm seeing there. Whether in India this would latch on much more faster, I do not know. It would take some time, but the seeds of the debate about education qualification versus skill on relation to employability is actually changing very, very quickly. That would be my response.
Okay, thank you, Shvankar. Before Kirti, you share your views, and I'll also come back to Murli sir. I think they quite a lot of work that TMI, as a group has done in this particular scale. There are few of our participants, who have questions on skilling, reskilling, etc. So can I, request Tanvi, because we have less than 20 minutes left, and I think should give also some time, and our views would help people get answers. So Tanvi, please, if you have some.
So we have plenty of questions. I think we'll be able to take up few, and we'll like to answer most of them. So I'm just taking up Ankit on board. Ankit, please go ahead and ask your question.
Hello everyone. So I have a question.
Ankit, your video is off. If you want to switch on, or is it?
I think it'll be off, sir.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Ankit, fine.
You guys are able to hear me, right?
Yeah. Loud and clear.
Yes.
Great. So I want to ask, what is the value of upskilling? Would it be valuable with context to the resume and better position in the company? Would the management consider such online courses as a benefit in a skill set? So I want to ask that. It is open for anyone. Thank you.
You want me to answer it, Anil? The question
Yes,
directed to
sure,
me?
please. Sure, please.
Yeah, I think in my mind, I think we discussed also education. I think education and experience can be a big liability in disruptive times like this. If you summarize whatever you do in life, there's only one question we ask: how does this work? So when you take a decision, we're asking a question: will this work? And the answer to the question always is, I've done some time in the past, it worked for me. So our biggest challenge now, as I see for myself, with what I'm 62 now, and I'm studying law now, and I'm also a journalist. I'm learning new skills all the time. I tell myself, what I know is a liability. What I do is a liability. If I don't understand this very, very simplistic answer, the moment I think or I believe that I know something, we are finished. I think that's my fundamental. I think Andrew Grove said that you have to be paranoid. I'm not paranoid about my business, but I'm paranoid about my knowledge and my liability, knowledge and experience coming in my way. So the logic for upskilling comes from the fact that you don't know. So it is actually not that I know and therefore I want to add to my skills or online courses or offline courses. Invariably learning, we have been learning for 20 years now, especially adult learning. And I think by far the most important thing in learning is motivation to learn. That's more important than all other tools and techniques and content and all that. So the motivation part starts by saying that I need to realize I can be obsolescent tomorrow, and therefore I need to learn. Now the second question is, what do I learn? How do I learn? These are two related questions. I always ask myself these, what do you think will be relevant 5 years from now? And invariably today, everybody talking about digital natives. We are now working on a course on digital selling. For example, selling is going to go from face-to-face to digital selling. How does one become a super salesman in a digital era? How do you become a digital native yourself? So I would say top 5, next 5 years, what are the 2-3 skills which you can start supply in your company? And the best way to learn that is, I would say today, online courses is a good way to start, but they are a very small portion, 10% of the knowledge. And the real learning happens only by doing a live project in that domain. Nothing else you can do other than doing a live project. Learning by doing by far overreaches any other option of skilling or upskilling that you can do.
Okay, thank you, sir. Kirti, you have been doing quite a lot of work, and now, especially from a future skills perspective. So, would you like to add something here?
So I think in a word, upskilling, you just have to do it. In the tech world, of course, which is where NASSCOM sits, it's an imperative. Technology is changing too fast. Applications of technology are changing even faster. And now with COVID hitting us, it's all got accelerated. What we tried to talk about digital transformation, it's here. We just have to transform, and if we don't transform, we are dead. So whether it is medicine, whether it is education, whether it is retail, whether it is, I mean, you name it, it has to move digital for it to work. So in this world, at least, upskilling is not a choice. It's an imperative. For companies also, when they have a decision to make tomorrow of whether they let you go or someone else go, what do you think is going to help them make that decision? And it's not just about getting that certificate. Getting that certificate demonstrates your motivation to learn. So Murali talked about having the motivation to learn. I will talk about demonstrating that you have the ability or the desire to learn, because that's what companies want. Companies will train you. I don't think no company today wants to scrimp on training its people, but they want to know that the money they're spending on that person is going to be worth it, and that person has an open mind to learn. So learning agility is something that I think is cropping up in every conversation. And now you have to think, how do you demonstrate learning agility? You demonstrate it by actually going and learning something and showing that you can do whatever it is that you learned, and demonstrate it, whether it is in a project, whether it is in an internship, whether it is in a side thing, whether you volunteer on something inside your company, but to show that you can use what you've learned. So it's important to be able to differentiate yourself. If it was important earlier, it is even more important now. And will companies recognize it? Certainly they will. We have programs which are running in colleges. I don't want to talk about what's happening inside companies because this is a public forum. But in colleges, companies are now going out and giving differential offers to people who are doing a little above and beyond. And that's where I agree with Shubhankar, where he says about the value of the formal degree versus of the skill. The formal degree perhaps is still a filter in India because our numbers are so large. So it becomes an easy way to just say, okay, I will consider this and no more. But at NASSCOM, what we're trying to do is create a pool. So try and make it a democratic pool where it's not so relevant about which college you came from, but it is about what you have got certified in, what skills you have learned. It's early days. It's a portal that we are working on where we want everybody to just put their people in, and the emphasis is on what skills they have rather than what degrees and what colleges they come from. It's a change management process, not going to happen in a day. But I think with COVID, it will accelerate. I am convinced of that. And while I did put you in the spot, Shubhankar, I think it was more in the mood of being a little provocative and making the conversation interesting. But I do believe that it is going to go that way. It is about demonstrating what you know. And for the digital natives, it's even more, because while we are the ones leading organizations, we are not the doers. Our time is gone. We can't think the way the digital native can think. He lives, he breathes this digital technology. So reverse mentoring is a word I learned 2 years ago. And I think all the tech companies are doing this is big time, where they're asking youngsters to teach them what is really going on in the world of technology, because the applications that we as organizations are building are all being used by these guys. So the learning has to happen both ways. It's not only I have to run the organization and enable the skilling that you can do, but I also have to be able to learn and be open to what you can teach me as a millennial, as a Gen Z, or call yourself whichever generation you want to. And I'll give you an example. We are building a platform right now. We have a platform right now called Future Skills, which is for organizations.
Kirti, I'll just come for a minute. We are just 7-8 minutes left even of our extended time. So if you won't mind, if you other, yeah.
Fair. I'll stop here.
So the example, sorry for interrupting.
I'll just conclude by saying upskilling will never be wasted.
Never be wasted. So there are a few questions. So maybe a 10-second answers. Any one of you can take it. Very interesting. So do you see people thinking of entrepreneurship during this pandemic? Is a good idea? There's another similar question. Should I look for a job or, become an entrepreneur?
So answer is absolutely yes. But you need to not just jump into it. You need to ask yourself what is really needed at this point in time. What will help people? Remember, it has to add value to people. It's not what you want to do. Yes, 10-second answer, Anil.
And do you have the mindset for it?
I would be very cautious asking people to jump straight into entrepreneurship. Unless you really understand yourself, your motivation, this is not for the faint-hearted. You walk into it and then you could get singed and then come back. And you will start to lose your confidence. The best thing is you better ask yourself why you're wanting to get into it.
I think very aptly put. I think you first do your homework well. I think there's a difference between gambling and taking a calculated risk or a chance. Even a lot of experienced people have burned their hands or fingers getting into it. Having said that, is not that any one of us wants to discourage you. Many of us have done it. Exactly. And done it even after failing, but have to see your own appetite too. Okay, so we have another 7-8 minutes. Maybe I'll go back to our agenda. I had, I have one request from, all of you as the time is less. So if you have to give just one piece of advice to our audience, what during this period, so what that advice would be?
I could go first. My advice is the one that I give myself all the time. Just 4 words. Even this shall pass. Even this shall pass. And my personal credo is water cuts rock. Never give up. Never give up. This is here. This will go.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Lovely.
Yes,
I think
Rajesh.
I'll go. So you spoke about sutra, so I'm going to give you a Chanakya sutra here. Okay, it says Purushkaram anuvartate daivam. There are 2 words here, Purushkaram and daivam. Anuvartate basically says one follows the other. Daivam is uncontrollables. Purushkaram is human effort or controllables. Simply put, Chanakya says, focus on the controllables, the uncontrollables will automatically follow you. So focus on that which is tangible and put all your effort there. Invariably, what we call as good fortune will pursue.
I think it's very important, Rajesh. And I heard even Shubhankar when he talked about that internal locus of control? What is within your control that you have? Yeah, Shubhankar, your piece of advice?
I think Murli spoke about it and I espouse that. I think adaptability to the current context is very important. How do we really, organizations adapt themselves, individuals adapt themselves, communities, governments are adapting themselves. I think adaptability is and flexibility is the key thing that would take us forward.
Thank you. Kirti?
Mine would be, whatever you do, ask yourself, is this the best I can do? Because if it's not the best you can do, if you ask yourself, is this the best I can do, you will actually go and learn something or study something or do something to make it better. So just see, is this the maximum that I can do or can I do more? And the moment you do that, you extend yourself to you raise yourself to a different level.
Thank you. And I certainly am waiting, to hear, and that's why I said have the last advice from Murli sir.
I think these two things I follow myself, so it's not an advice to somebody else. First is, I believe today the first day of the rest of your life. So whatever happened in the past, it doesn't matter. We got a whole life ahead of you. Today is the first day. And the second is, I am the CEO of my own life. So I don't depend on anybody else. I have to make my choices. I have to live with the choice I make. So there's no regret in life if you make all the choices willingly, knowingly, so that even if you go wrong, you can dust it off. So these two are my philosophies. First, you are the CEO of your own life, and today is the first day of the rest of my life.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your own life's philosophy with us. As we are coming towards the end, I would take a few minutes here. Of course, as Talib said, a book, if you can summarize, then that's not a book. So even today's, our discussion is such, if someone asks me to summarize, I don't think, we can summarize. And if you summarize, then this wasn't a, panel discussion that we would have wanted to have. Also, just not for, individuals. I was just looking when I was, looking for Shubhankar's profile, etc. And I looked at Lenovo as an organization and how in today's time, and there are many examples, I think every organization is reinventing. They had Lenovo 1.0 in 2005, and where they said we'll get into PC business and we'll become, market leaders. Then came Lenovo 2.0, and they said PC is not enough. We're going to get into laptops and tablets and data servers and mobile phones and many other things. And here comes another, and this is within 10, 12 years time frame. An organization says, oh no, that's not enough. Now I think we have to put into forefront of virtual and augmented reality, AI, intelligent automation, etc. So why I am bringing this point for our audience here is, I think all of us have to, whether disruption or no disruption, as beautifully Kirti put it, these are not disruptions, this is a way of life. And if that's a way of life, I think we have to take it in our strides. We have to keep on doing more than what we think we can do. And in the end, I have few lines from Harivansh Rai Bachchan. लहरों से डरकर नौका पार नहीं होती और कोशिश करने वाले की हार नहीं होती. असफलता एक चुनौती है, इसे स्वीकार करो. क्या कमी रह गई, देखो और सुधार करो. जब तक न सफल हो, नींद चैन को त्यागो तुम. संघर्ष का मैदान छोड़कर मत भागो तुम. कुछ किए बिना ही जय जयकार नहीं होती और कोशिश करने वालों की हार नहीं होती. So with that, I bring come to the end, and once again thank this panel for your views, and these were your personal experiences, your own philosophies, your own principles that you shared. And I also thank our audience. Till now I see quite a large number of people are still, even after we extended it for half an hour. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you to all the panelists.
Thank you.
You were really kind and generous to answer all the questions, some of them on text and some of them live. And for those of you who missed some part of it, we're uploading the video on YouTube. Thank you once again for your time. Take care.
Anil, thank you very much.
As Anil
and
started, namaste and goodbye.
Namaste.
Namaste. Goodbye.
Namaste. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy.
Bye.
Thank you all.